Hello, I'm Anthony. Today I'm going to show you how to connect your insert effects to your hardware. So we can press a button on our hardware controller and turn stomp effects on and off inside. I've got a couple of multi-effects units here. I've got Amplitude and Bias FX. You can see them added as insert effects on the audio track. If you find this video useful today, please hit the like button. It really helps me out with my YouTube stuff. I've also got a Patreon account if you want to check out the link below. That's an awesome way to help support my channel. So there are two different ways of doing this. We can use MIDI CC data or automation. Approach number one is going to be using MIDI. And in order to accomplish this, I need to add a new MIDI track. I'm going to call it FX Send, add track. Now I have a Native Instruments machine. I'm going to use that today for the purpose of sending the on-off instructions to the stomp box, but literally any piece of hardware that sends MIDI into Cubase is going to be absolutely fine. But for my purposes, you can see that I've got my MIDI track. I'm going to set my input to machine Mark III, and I'm going to disconnect the output. The next thing I'm going to do is enable two Midi Sends. The first one is going to send information to Amplitude, and the second send is going to send information to Bias FX. The reason we have to do that is because the audio track, the guitar track here, doesn't implicitly output MIDI to insert effects connected to its channel. Now the effects units on the channel are capable of receiving MIDI, they're just not getting it from the audio track, so we basically have to cheat. By creating this separate MIDI track, it's listening for signals coming off the machine, and it's going to send those MIDI commands explicitly into the two effects units. The next thing that we have to do is teach the stomp effects what MIDI CC value to expect. So on the Amplitude, I've got this OCD effect. I'm going to right click on the knob itself on the bypass knob, and this unfortunately is a very dark font, but it says assign MIDI bypass. And now I'm going to engage Learn Bypass mode. Now the button that I'm going to be pressing on the machine is transmitting CC58, but it's not going to work. If I click Learn Bypass and press my 58 button, you can see the MIDI signal coming in on the track, but it's not getting to Amplitude. What you have to do is engage monitoring on the guitar track. The guitar track has to be basically active. So I'm going to do exactly the same process again. Right click, assign MIDI, bypass, learn bypass, press my number 58, and this time it's immediately understood that signal. Let's turn monitoring off for a moment. You can hear the live audio track. We now have a look at this OCD pedal. It's really, really dark, but that basically says bypass MIDI CC58. I can't actually read it from where I'm sat, but I happen to know that that's what it says. It is mapped to that signal. So let's turn monitoring on the guitar track back on. I'll press my button, and there's the OCD coming on and off. Let's do the same on Bias FX. Slightly different process, but same result. Right click on the stomp box. This time we go into assignment. Every FX unit is going to have its own idiosyncrasies for how it learns the MIDI CC, but they all follow a similar kind of pattern. This time I have to select assignment, and I can put it in learn mode, or I can explicitly give it a number. Well, I'm going to try to give it a number first. I'll click learn. This time I'm going to send 59 to the Bias FX. Again, absolutely nothing. Turn monitoring on, and you can see as soon as I turned monitoring on, it's like that signal was held back by a dam. The moment I turn monitoring on, the signal gets through. I have no idea why. If anybody understands why you have to engage monitoring to make this process work, please put it in the comments below, because it's a total mystery to me. Whether or not the audio track is receiving a guitar signal should have absolutely nothing to do with anything, but it does. Now unfortunately I can't show you the buttons themselves. At the moment both of the buttons on my machine are off. Okay, turn monitoring on, press both buttons. So I've just pressed both 58 and 59. The Amplitude is off, Bias is on. Turn them off from the machine. Amplitude's on, Bias FX is off. So basically, BiasFX is getting it right. It's completely and correctly mirroring every time I turn. I'm just pressing 59 at the moment. On, off, works absolutely fine. I do 58 for the amplitude. It's currently off, lights on. It's now on, lights off. It's the wrong way round. Okay. So now both of my machine buttons are off and the amplitude is still wrong. So we basically need to invert the logic for this control. What amplitude is effectively doing is it's treating it as a bypass function. So it's effectively saying the bypass is off, and that's an active state. When the bypass is on, the pedal is off. So it's basically inverted the logic. It's absolutely ridiculous. So we have to basically switch the MIDI function for this OCD pedal. Well, we can do that. These two effects units are receiving different MIDI CC commands. The OCD is receiving a 58 and the muff is receiving a 59. If we head over to MIDI inserts on the MIDI track, I'm going to add a new MIDI insert effect called transformer. And this is using the logical editor, Cubase's logical editor, and I'll show you the logic for this insert MIDI FX inverter. So what we're basically saying here is if any MIDI information flows down this channel and the type is a controller and the CC value is equal to the number that you want, so in our case 58, value 2 contains the actual value. Well, it's either 0 or 127. The state is either on or off. And by setting the operation to mirror with 64, you effectively invert the polarity. What do you want me to say? This is how to do it. Let's just move on, shall we? I'm going to turn the MIDI monitor on. I just ended up in window hell there, but we're all fixed now. Okay, so here's our MIDI monitor. So this is going to basically tell us, if I turn the transformer off, what signals are incoming on this track. So press my machine activation button. So the light is now on. It's just sent a positive signal into amplitude, and as you can see, it's got it wrong and turned it upside down. Turn the button off, it receives a 0. Now we engage the transformer. Press the button again, and now the light's on, but we've sent a 0. Press the off button, it now sends a 127, which turns amplitude off. So now my machine control is synced up with the OCD. The light's off on my hardware, the OCD's light is off. The light's on my hardware, the OCD light is active. The bias, however, which was always correct and absolutely fine, lights off, controls off, lights on, controls on. So that's it, mission accomplished. You've got your two buttons, you've got your two FX units, both mapped successfully, all the lights are in sync. Now I'll show you the alternative method using automation. I'm going to throw all of those changes away and get back to a completely bare audio track with the two FX units, but none of the other MIDI stuff. And this time we're going to use automation via quick controls. So here are Cubase's quick controls. Turn the track quick controls on. Now when we right click on the OCD button, instead of saying assign MIDI, we're going to say assign automation instead, and we're going to assign OCD to parameter 1. So amplitude has 16 automation slots. We're sending that stock box to slot number 1. And for the FX, we're not going into right click MIDI assignment anymore, we're going into automation. And this time we're going to assign the muff to automation channel 2. You could assign it to track 1. The automation lanes of these two units have got absolutely nothing to do with each other, but to keep it nice and clean, we'll use automation track 2 for the bias. Now we have to teach Cubase where those automation lanes are. Now sometimes the learn feature works in track quick controls. You should be able to just click learn and then hit the button and you can see amplitude just worked. Sadly, it doesn't work for Bias FX. If I do exactly the same process and turn the muff on, Cubase doesn't hear it. So we have to do it manually for the bias. I'll do them both manually so that you can see what I'm doing. I've clicked in track slot number 1. I head into the inserts. insert number 1 is the amplitude. I'll just show you again. Here's insert slot number 1, amplitude. There it is, and it's param 1. You can rename these, so that's OCD overdrive. And in slot number 2, this time we're heading off to insert effect number 2, which is the bias FX, and we assigned it to slot number 2, and we'll call that guitar muff. Somewhere in Cubase you'll have your quick control channel set up. Here's my track quick controls set up in Cubase, so you can see that this time controller 1 is going to output channel 14, controller 2 is going to output 15. So I've got those set up on a different piece of kit. It's actually my complete keyboard that transmits those signals. So now I'll press a 14, there's the OCD, and 15, there's turning the muff on and off. Now sadly, if you use this mechanism with automation, there's no way to invert the MIDI polarity. So all of the lights on my keyboard are currently off, and you can see that the amplitude OCD is the wrong way round. I've not found any mechanism to solve that problem. So it's a superior solution from the perspective of being able to see the names of all of your effects and the order of the alignment of your buttons, but it's inferior in that you can't invert the MIDI signal and turn an off into an on. So have some soup, wrap a hot towel around your head, and go and absorb all of that. There it is. All I can do is pass the information on. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that.